You see, triple murderer and rapist Anthony Russell, who, in February 2026, committed the savage attack on Soham murderer Ian Huntley that claimed the man's life, is a bog-standard inmate at HMP Frankland. Before we get to the Couzenses, the Bellfields and the Fullers, let's explore the very evil of Anthony Russell. In October 2020, Russell, who comes from Coventry, got it into his head that his mate, David Williams, was sleeping with his girlfriend. In the murderous attack on David that he then made, he left the man with as many as 87 injuries. Despite all that damage to his body, David's cause of death was later confirmed as strangulation. For your information, David wasn't sleeping with Russell's woman. He lost his life for nothing. Some days later, when David's mother, Julia, went to Russell and asked him if he'd seen her son, after saying no and then helping her look for him, he murdered her as well. It's thought that the killer did what he did when Julia let on that she knew that he'd killed her son, which left him, to his mind, with no choice other than to kill her as well in order to prevent her from talking. Russell strangled Julia with extreme force as well as battering her, causing her a total of 113 separate injuries. Shortly after Julia's sister reported her missing, police went to her flat and found her lying dead on the living room floor. After his second act of murder, the perpetrator, a heroin user, scarpered over to Leamington Spa and promptly attacked a 72-year-old woman before stealing 200 quid from her. When he befriended 31-year-old Nicole McGregor, along with her boyfriend, he learned early on that Nicole was 18 weeks pregnant. Nicole was actually already a mother, but all her children were in care, and Nicole was determined to straighten her life out and at least be a responsible mother to her coming baby. Nicole, you understand, was a lifelong drug addict, and she was still taking drugs even then while pregnant. It was on the promise of drugs from Russell that she agreed to go off to some woodland with the man without her boyfriend just a few hours after she first met him. Her body was found in the woods 3 days later, and, just like in the case of Russell's first two victims, it held numerous injuries, Russell having given her a ferocious battering before once again strangling her to death. The act of rape that he perpetrated on her before murdering her is again thought to be why he killed her. He didn't want her going to the police. Before Nicole's body was found, Russell had gone and helped her very worried boyfriend look for her, commenting in regard to the baby that he, the boyfriend, and Nicole were expecting, quote, "I bet you can't wait for it to be born," unquote. Yes, Russell was fully aware when he said those words that because of him, the baby would never be born. Russell next followed a 78-year-old man who he had just politely asked for directions into his home, bashed him up and then stole the man's car, a Ford C-Max. He was captured a day or two later in Burton-upon-Trent, sleeping in the car. Russell's killing, rape, assault and robbery spree unravelled in the space of a single week. When, in 2022, he gave Russell his whole life order, life with no chance of parole that is, the judge described the man as exceptionally dangerous, manipulative and callous, showing a complete absence of empathy, conscience or restraint, which sets us up quite neatly for the events that took place in the waste management workshop at HMP Frankland on the 26th of February 2026. Having been feuding by now for weeks, Russell and Huntley were scrubbing out the recycling section of the workshop when they got into a fight. At a moment when Huntley's back was turned, Russell picked up a 3-foot-long spiked metal pole that he got from a waste metal crate, went up to Huntley and whacked him on the head time and again with his deadly weapon. As the prison officers dragged Russell away, he shouted, "I've done it, I've killed him." Prison staff themselves thought that Huntley, who was lying in a pool of blood with his head split open, was already dead. Huntley died at Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle on the 7th of March 2026, a few hours after his ventilator was switched off. How was Russell able to get hold of the spiked metal pole without prison staff knowing? How was he able to spend time creating the spikes without staff seeing him? And how did he even make the spikes as he reportedly did? Why weren't Russell and Huntley split up when they were fighting and then taken back to their cells? I don't know if we're ever going to get the answer to those questions and to the many others coming from Russell's violent act against Huntley on the 26th of February 2026. At the time of this recording, Russell, who's doing a whole life order for his previous triple murder, was due in court on the 24th of April 2026 to enter a plea. The worst that can happen to the man in the event that he's convicted of Huntley's murder is being moved to a new prison, doing a spell in solitary and suffering the temporary loss of his prison privileges. I don't think he'll suffer the fate of multiple inmate murderer Robert Maudsley, who spent all the 47 years in solitary confinement because of his multiple inmate murders, and of those 47 years he spent 42 in an underground cage full of rats and spiders and cockroaches and flies, all on his own, because, unlike him, Anthony Russell isn't a multiple inmate murderer. After Ian Huntley got a club to the head, killer cop Wayne Couzens expressed his fear, reportedly, that he would be next. Sir, after what you did, you've got no right to even hold that fear, never mind express it. Before we get into his story though, lovely viewer, if I've got you hooked on the video so far, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready, and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you. Killer cop Wayne Couzens was complaining about the threats against his life that he has suffered even before the murder of Ian Huntley, which took place in the prison where Couzens is held. Then again, how could the man have expected not to end up in prison after doing what he did back in 2021 during COVID? On the night of the 3rd of March 2021, Couzens got out of his hire car in Clapham, South London, went up to a random woman on the street who happened to be a 33-year-old marketing executive called Sarah Everard, falsely arrested her for breaching COVID restrictions, and then drove her all the way down to Kent, raped her in some woods, and then strangled her to death with his very police belt. The man exposed himself to every street camera between Clapham and Kent. He'd booked his hire car in his true name and used his mobile phone in the area where he raped and murdered his victim. This guy was a police officer who knows how police catch criminals. And yet, he genuinely got the shock of his life when, 6 days after he did what he did, his colleagues came for him in relation to Sarah's disappearance, and likewise, having been totally unprepared for that moment, he improvised the most stupid cover story for his act of kidnap that you've ever heard in your life.
Well, I am in financial shit. And I've been lent on by, I don't know who they are. They're a group, a gang, whatever. And they told me, right, I need to go and pick up girls and give them to them. There's a couple of names. I was told a place to take her. That's it. That is all I know.
The one truth that the man told his fellow coppers was that he was broke. God only knows what he was spending his Metropolitan Police officer salary on though, or was his salary just not enough to support a family of 4 down in Kent? A skint copper can be kicked out of the force or just not be allowed to join in the first place, since having money problems makes a copper susceptible to taking bribes. What also came out after the man's conviction was that he had committed a number of acts of flashing, was addicted to extreme you-know-whatography, and tried to get his colleagues to watch that sort of stuff as well. And he's once run away from home and gone missing, and I mean as a married father of 2, another behaviour for which a copper can be sacked. Couzens appealed against his whole life order, a sentence that means that a prisoner is never getting out, on grounds that he just didn't deserve to be locked up forever. The appeal court said, yes you do, and duly rejected his appeal. So frankly, the man had better get used to having his life threatened, because he's going to be locked up until he dies. And there is every chance that he will be fatally attacked by any one or more of his inmates, just like the Soham guy. Levi Bellfield targeted young blondes for his murderous violence, and that's not the only twisted thing about him. Levi Bellfield is literally evil by name. Born in 1968, he's a serial killer, a sex offender, a rapist, a kidnapper and a burglar. He's also a woman beater. He had numerous relationships which spawned him, I think, 10 or 11 children, and many of those relationships collapsed because he used to beat the you-know-what out of his girlfriends and wives. He was married to some of them and just living with others just as a boyfriend and girlfriend set up. In 2008, he was convicted of the murders of Marsha McDonnell and Emily de la Grange and of the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy, and he got a whole life order. And then in 2011, he was found guilty of the murder of schoolgirl Millie Dowler, and he again received a whole life order for that murder as well. So he's got 2 whole life orders, and he was in fact the first prisoner in the UK to receive 2 whole life orders.
Did you get a kick out of being involved in these sort of inquiries?
No comment.
Do you think it's a macho type of thing to be here?
No.
Do you think it will help your notoriety?
No comment.
Do you honestly believe that your actions over the 21st and the 22nd of March 2002 are the actions of an innocent man?
No comment.
Then are you an innocent man?
No comment.
Because if you are, tell us.
No comment.
And give us that explanation for where you were and what you were doing.
No comment.
Are you able to do that, Levi?
No comment.
Sarah's told you what she believes you did that particular day, and I wholly support what she says. I believe you took her off the street that day. I believe your motivation was sexual, and I believe you took her back to Collingwood Place, and I believe you killed her there. That's the truth, isn't it?
No comment, sir.
That's what happened.
No comment.
And then you've used the day of next year to move her body. Is that the truth?
No.
So that's what's happened, isn't it?
No comment.
And then sometime over the following few days, you've driven down to Hampshire, an area that you know, and you've dumped her body.
No comment, sir.
That's the truth, isn't it?
No comment, sir.
He once, as a child, had SHX with a rabbit, and afterwards he broke the rabbit's neck. His original surname was none other than Rabbit. RABBETTS. He used to sleep with his mother. I don't think they did the thing together, but they used to sleep in the same bed for many, many years. I think well into Levi's teens. And whenever he used to go home and see his mother as an adult, again, he used to sleep in the same bed as her. She wiped his body bot for him until he was around 12. And he also, before he took to murder, was alleged to have committed a number of essays against young girls when he worked as a nightclub bouncer. But even though the man is as thick as you know what, somehow he was always able to destroy the DNA evidence that he left behind, and so he was never caught. And the police in many cases didn't take the allegations from the girls who came forward about him seriously. A lot of them took drugs and stuff like that, and the police really just didn't care. And so that is the story of Levi Bellfield. David Fuller prefers his great victims dead, and if they aren't already dead when he gets to them, guess what he does?
Hello. Morning. David, it's the police. Hello. We need to come and speak to you. Oh, yes.
Presenting hospital maintenance worker, husband, father of 4, burglar, PDF file, rapist and double murderer, David Fuller.
David, you're under arrest on suspicion of the murders of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pearce in 1987. Do you understand? You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned.
This December 2020 arrest of David Fuller, who was born in 1954 and comes from Kent, southeast England, was no less than 33 years in the making. The man's murder of 25-year-old Wendy Nell having come in June 1987, while his murder of 20-year-old Caroline Pearce came in November 1987. Taking place in Tunbridge Wells, Kent. Owing to the sort of place where each of the 2 victims lived, the 2 murders became known as the bedsit murders. The acts of rape that Fuller was found to have perpetrated against both Wendy and Caroline most likely came after the 2 women died, which prefigures, if you like, the hobby that the man rapidly developed in his many years as a maintenance engineer at 2 Kent hospitals. Of the 102 corpses, all female of course, that Fuller raped and essayed in the CCTV lacking mortuaries of the 2 said hospitals, the youngest was but 9, while the oldest was 100. In the videos that the perpetrator made of these disgusting acts of his, he's seen placing his thing, let's say, inside the mouths, the A-bleep-U-S-E-S, and the VA bleep INAS of these bodies. I am disguising certain words because of YouTube's decency policies. The man also used his tongue and fingers in his acts, graping and essaying some of the corpses repeatedly over a number of days.
There's some stuff stuck on the back of that one as well. I've got the body worn on it literally as it's happened.
What's that?
Well, on the back of his chest of drawers, it looks like he's got some hard drives in there, I would say.
Oh.
But they're stuck to the back of the chest of drawers.
Yeah, and then it's got number 28, born, died, hasn't put a date, photo, born, died, no thing, photo, no bit. Number 48, date of birth, date of death.
He's identified the victims.
Sorry?
Those are
Yeah,
the
well,
victims.
yeah, the ones who...
No, they are. They're the ones in there.
Here is how Fuller's mortuary offences impacted Nevres Kemmel, a woman whose only child, Azra Kemmel, 24, died in an accident on a bridge, her dead body becoming one of the many that the perpetrator graped.
I had spent 2 wonderful hours in the mortuary, sleeping with her, and that gave me some sort of comfort. Little did I know that my daughter had been violated prior to that day and in the evening of that day. So whilst I'm stroking my daughter's hair, sleeping on her hair, a man had crawled all over her skin, and there's me kissing and cuddling and saying my last goodbyes.
The shocking thing seems to be that he had access for 20 minutes, half an hour.
Well, I'll give you the details, Jason. The first time was 13 minutes, the second time was 15 minutes, and the day that I visited Azra and spent quality time, and my last time with Azra, was for 35 minutes.
This is the moment where the perpetrator sheepishly confesses to his acts of rape against the dead bodies held in his place of work.
I want to admit I am admitting the offences, but I don't really want to go into detail.
Yeah. Okay.
If you appreciate that.
And what offences are you admitting, David?
As you've just described to me.
Okay. In terms of the sexual penetration of corpses? Okay. And do you know how many occasions, David?
No.
No. Have you been recording yourself doing those things? Recording yourself penetrating the corpses?
I admit that offences.
Yeah. Okay. What did you retain the recordings for?
I don't know either.
Okay. Was it for further sexual pleasure, David? You know, in the same way as somebody would keep pornography or things like that. Was it for further sexual pleasure?
No.
In the raid of Fuller's home, police found numerous images downloaded from the internet showing women and girls who'd been raped and or murdered. They also found no fewer than 4 million indecent images of you-know-what sort of people. As for the man's career as a burglar, this unravelled between 1973 and 1976, the man gaining dozens of convictions for that offence in that period. In December 2021, after his trial was cut short when he changed his plea to the charges of murder relating to Wendy Nell and Caroline Pearce from not guilty to guilty, Fuller got a whole life order. The two murders were, of course, the lead offences, but the man was also sentenced at this point for his mortuary-based hobby and for downloading indecent images of you-know-who. In November 2022, though, the man pleaded guilty to and was sentenced for a further 16 counts of necro thingy. As you can see, though, at this point, the man had nothing whatsoever to lose. Michael Adebolajo killed in answer to God's very call. On the afternoon of the 22nd of May 2013, a British Army soldier, drummer Lee Rigby of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, was attacked and killed by Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale near the Royal Artillery Barracks in Woolwich, south-east London. Both men were Muslim converts, and their murder of Lee Rigby was an act of protest against the atrocities, as they saw them, being committed by the British Army against citizens of Muslim countries. 29-year-old Adebolajo was found guilty of Mr Rigby's murder on the 19th of December 2013, and so was Adebowale. Adebolajo, however, held a greater share of liability for the murder of father of one Mr Rigby, such as is reflected in his sentence compared to that of Adebowale, the sentence details coming soon. The youngest of Adebolajo's 6 children, a little girl, was but 4 days old when, alongside an accomplice, her father went and ran over an innocent man who happened to be in the army before hacking him to death with knives and with a cleaver. In response to the arrival, around 5 minutes later, of armed police officers, the two murderous maniacs, who were armed with a gun as well as with the said bladed articles, charged at the police. As a result of the gunfire that they each suffered from the police, the two killers were hospitalised, Adebowale having had one of his thumbs shot off. In contrast, and thankfully, no police officers were harmed. The calm and coherent way in which Adebolajo explained during his first court appearance his motives for his horrific act, revenge for the killing of Muslims overseas by British soldiers, as I mentioned earlier, offered a stark contrast to the notably stilted but no less bravado-laden speaking that he did in his police interview.
We decided to wait in the vicinity of the barracks that is in Woolwich. By the qadr of Allah, by Allah's decree, whilst waiting to find a soldier, because between us we decided that the soldier is the most fair target, because he joins the army with kind of an understanding that your life is at risk when you join the army, you know. So we sat in wait, and it just so happened that he was the soldier that was spotted first.
On the 26th of February 2014, at the Old Bailey, Adebowale got life with a minimum of 45 years, while Adebolajo got his whole life order. In a rather shocking piece of news, 4 years later, Adebolajo expressed regret for doing what he did to Lee Rigby. He said his justification for his act, coming as it did from the Quran, was a misinterpretation of the Quran and that he'd been brainwashed. Lee Rigby's mother, though, whose name is Lynn Rigby, rejected his apology and said that she'd never forgive him. Damien Fowkes might be a nasty armed robber, but he's got his principles, you know. Ask the bloke that he topped in prison. Having been locked up for the offence of armed robbery, Damien Fowkes has long since gained a reputation in prison for being a no-nonsense punisher. Where he can, he hurts fellow inmates who have hurt children. Around 2011, he got 20 years added to his sentence for slashing the throat of double child killer Ian Huntley in HMP Frankland. That act of his put Huntley in hospital. And in that act of his, attempted murder in other words, Fowkes used a homemade weapon on Huntley while Huntley was working, quite ironically, on the healthcare wing of the prison. For essaying a number of boys between 1991 and 1992, Colin Hatch did less than 2 years. On getting out, he promptly went and committed, in January 1994, the S-bleep-Eweley motivated murder of 7-year-old Sean Williams. In exchange, in 2011, Fowkes barricaded himself and Hatch into a cell on D Wing at HMP Full Sutton and told prison officers that he wouldn't kill Hatch as long as the prison officers stayed outside. The officers dealt with the matter as a hostage situation, but Fowkes did kill Hatch. He strangled him using strips of bedding as ligatures. Before killing him, Fowkes had told the prison officers, quote, "He's a nonce. He doesn't deserve to live." And then he said after that child offenders, quote, "just do my head in. It was the same when I did Huntley," unquote. The man was convicted not of murder though, but of manslaughter. It was somehow then successfully argued in court that Fowkes never meant to kill Hatch. Of course, in October 2016, over in HMP Whitemoor in Cambridgeshire, Fowkes himself nearly died when 49-year-old Kevin McCarthy slit his throat. This happened when McCarthy grabbed Fowkes from behind and cut his throat with a homemade blade while lunch was being prepared on the day in question, the 2nd of October 2016. There was no clear motive for the violent assault, but some prisoners had complained about McCarthy not taking his turn to clean the kitchen earlier that morning. This was the third time that McCarthy had tried to murder a prisoner, the man having been locked up for attempted murder and having convictions stretching back to 1990. Gary Vinter keeps trying to kill his inmate because he will never again be free to kill on the outside. Standing all of 6 foot 7 inches tall, Gary Vinter is a mountain of a man. He's also a double murderer, his first murder having come in August 1995, the victim having been a young man by the name of Carl Eden. Carl and Vinter were work colleagues, but I've got no idea why Vinter killed Carl. Vinter did 10 years for that murder and then came out on life licence, and then 2.5 years after that, he chased his estranged wife, Anne White, into her kitchen and stabbed her to death. As a result of that second murder of his, he got a whole life order. He'll never be released. In 2012, Vinter sharpened a toilet brush handle and jammed it into the eye of child killer Roy Whiting. Roy Whiting has suffered numerous attacks while he's been in prison, but he's always survived. And on that note, he made a full recovery after what Vinter did to him and also chose not to press charges against Vinter. Vinter said he did what he did to Whiting because Whiting is a, quote, dirty little nonce, unquote. In November 2014, Vinter nearly kicked another prisoner to death. That prisoner was Lee Newell, who, like Vinter, at that point had committed 2 murders, one of which having come in prison, and had, like Vinter, received a whole life order because of that second murder. Vinter did what he did to Newell because he'd asked for a transfer to a prison with better gym facilities and it wasn't happening. Newell was left with permanent damage as a result of that vicious beating that he got from Vinter, and amongst that damage is the fact that he lost the sight in one eye and he was awarded £85,000 compensation. Despite being blind in one eye, despite being in his mid-50s and despite having already committed 2 murders, one of which having come in prison, as at the time of this recording, the man was facing his 3rd murder charge for the murder of Kyle Bevan, a child killer at HMP Wakefield. That murder came less than a month after the murder of Ian Watkins that took place in the same prison. There were 2 other men who were charged with Bevan's murder alongside Newell, Mark Fellows and David Taylor. All I can find out about David Taylor is that he was already a murderer. As for Lee Newell and Mark Fellows, I tell their story in some detail in more than one other video. I will link one of those videos in the description box below. Unlike Whiting, Lee Newell pressed charges against Vinter for what Vinter did to him. And Vinter's solicitor argued in Vinter's defence that because Vinter is banged up forever with no hope of ever getting out, he's got no incentive to behave and refrain from violence. And I'll just make the point there that the solicitor was clearly being crass. Vinter was given a chance at living as a free person and abstaining from from violence, and he blew it. So he's only got himself to blame for the position that he's in now. He did get another life sentence with a minimum term of 18 years for what he did to Newell, but as we can all see, and as the judge said to him, it doesn't even matter because you were never getting out anyway. Michael Parr and Nathan Mann didn't do what they did to Mitchell Harrison in 2011 out of justice, even if their victim was a dirty bar steward. 23-year-old Mitchell Harrison was a serial SHEX offender who, in 2010, got an indeterminate sentence for graping a 13-year-old girl who we'll call Maria. Harrison lured Maria to his flat in Kendal in Cumbria. Once he got her inside, he ordered her to strip before graping her twice. That was the third time that Harrison, who was originally from Wolverhampton, had been in trouble for essaying girls. When he was 13, he got a formal warning for indecently assaulting a 7-year-old. And when he was 15, he was taken to court for threatening to grape a 15-year-old classmate of his. In October 2011, Harrison was found in his cell with his intestines hanging out. He'd been disemboweled. Before ripping out Harrison's guts, Michael Parr, aged 32, was doing life for the attempted murder of a hospital patient. Nathan Mann, meanwhile, was doing 24 years for a double murder. That act came in 2007 in the course of the perpetrator's burglary of a nursing home in Leicester. After climbing into the building through an unlocked window in order to steal some booze, and God only knows why he broke into such a place as a nursing home to get his hands on booze, the 20-year-old landed in the room shared by two women, Rashmi Badiani, 56, and Radeben Chaun, 72. Both women had been stroke victims and had health problems that needed round-the-clock care. Radeben could only move her left hand. Man smothered her and battered Rashmi on the head, ending both their lives. Man was arrested just days after the murders, and it was revealed that he was actually on bail over assault charges at the time of the murders. As regards Harrison, in court it was revealed that Mann and Parr had expressed fantasies about beheading other prisoners and cutting out their stomachs, the two men having planned to eat Harrison's liver after slicing the man open once he was dead, but not having done so. Their murder weapons consisted of razor blades melted into toothbrush handles. Mann was described by a psychiatrist as a remorseless, callous psychopath who harboured cannibalistic urges and was one of the most dangerous men in the criminal justice system. Sentencing the pair for the ghastly and gruesome killing, Judge Mr. Justice Openshaw said, "I can't envisage circumstances in which either of them will ever be released." Parr got life with a minimum of 32 years and may never win parole, just like the judge said. Meanwhile, having been convicted not of murder but of voluntary manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility, Mann got life with a minimum term of 16 years to run consecutively to the 24-year minimum term that he's already doing for his earlier double murder. Again, the idea that the man will ever win parole is highly unrealistic, thankfully. John Duffy graped and then killed and killed. John Duffy is a rapist and murderer whose close friendship with his partner in his evil crimes, David Mulcahy, stemmed from their shared Irish Catholic heritage. Born in 1958 in the Republic of Ireland, Duffy, whose family moved over to England in search of work, instantly hit it off with Mulcahy in the year 1970 at Haverstock School in Camden, North London. At 13, the two once played a game of cricket together at school, using a living hedgehog as a ball. Then one day, when, as young adults, Duffy was working as a carpenter while Mulcahy was working as a plumber, the two were gutted when the woman that they had, out of the blue, decided to burgle and grape, failed to return home on the night in question. The plan of the two men to burgle and grape another woman was again thwarted when the woman came home with a man. One night in October 1982, though, the two did grape a 21-year-old woman after jumping out on her as she walked home and then putting a knife to her throat before forcing her into the garden of an empty house. In the course of 1983, the two men, who by this point were both married, committed no fewer than 18 rapes, their victims being pounced on late at night in streets mainly near railway stations in Hampstead, Barnet and other areas around North London. This led to the two men gaining the media dubbing of the railway grapists. The two men continued their grapes through to 1985, committing on one occasion 3 grapes in a single night in the said year, Hendon being where. In December of the said year, the two men strangled 19-year-old Alison Day to death with her own blouse near Hackney Wick, East London. They did that after graping her. In April 1986, they did the same to 15-year-old Marta Tamboza, sorry if I mispronounced that name, in West Horsley in Surrey, South East England. The following month, they kidnapped 29-year-old Anne Locke after she got off a train at Brookmans Park railway station in Hertfordshire and then raped her before murdering her. Duffy later offered a simple explanation for the two men's escalation to the offence of murder. Grape alone had stopped satisfying them. When, on the 26th of November 1986, Duffy was arrested while following a woman in a secluded park, the perpetrator having taken to committing grape alone on some occasions, you see, his 3 murders, along with some of his grapes, rapidly unravelled. What he kept secret for years, however, even after the 30-year prison term that he got in early 1988 was later upgraded to a whole life order, was the identity of his accomplice. Mulcahy, though, a father of 5, has been locked up since 2001 and isn't expected to get out even when he's done his 30-year minimum term, his former partner in grape and murder having grassed him up, you understand, in 1997. Known, like HMP Frankland, as Monsters Mansion, in late 2025, HMP Wakefield had 2 murders in less than a month. We will be looking at Roy Whiting, Mick Philpott and other notorious murderers held at this prison, but our first stop has to be the 2 lags who murdered pop star Ian Watkins and why. 25-year-old Rashid Gedel, known as Rico Gedel, who's already doing a life sentence for murder, and 43-year-old Samuel Dodsworth, who's doing 24 years for a vicious set of grapes that involves kidnap and false imprisonment, are, as at the time of this recording, awaiting trial for the murder of notorious child you-know-whatter Ian Watkins. A drug debt owed by Watkins to the 2 perpetrators appears to be, if rumours are to be believed, why the former pop star was done away with. This murder took place at HMP Wakefield. Just after 9:30 a.m. on Saturday the 11th of October 2025, as soon as cells were unlocked, the 2 perpetrators pounced, stabbing Watkins in the neck and catching his jugular vein. When emergency services arrived, they pronounced Watkins dead. At the time of this recording, the murder trial was set for May 2026 and was expected to last 2 to 3 weeks. As the singer from rock band Lost Prophet, Watkins was once one of Wales's most famous pop stars. At the height of their fame, the group sold millions of albums worldwide. All along though, Watkins was leading a disgusting double life, getting himself jailed for 29 years in December 2013 after admitting a string of child bleep offences, including the attempted grape of the 11-month-old baby of one of his fans. The man's arrest came following the execution of a drugs warrant at his Pontypridd home on the 21st of September 2012. At that point, a large number of computers, mobile phones and storage devices belonging to the man were seized and examined. In 2019, Watkins got 10 months added to his 29 years after he was found guilty of possessing a mobile phone in prison. In 2023, he suffered his first prison attack but didn't sustain any life-threatening injuries. During his time in prison, like many other high-profile inmates around the world, he got stacks of fan mail and apparently had, at the time of his death, a very young girlfriend. We've got another murder at Wakefield coming up now, and just wait until you learn the background of both the victim and the perpetrators. The murder of child killer Kyle Bevan at Wakefield Prison, which unravelled on the 5th of November 2025, came less than a month after the murder in the same prison of former Lost Prophets vocalist Ian Watkins. Bevan was doing 28 years for murdering the 2-year-old daughter of his girlfriend in July 2020. The battering that the man perpetrated against Lola James left the toddler with a total of over 100 visible injuries all over her body. Bevan hit the side of Lola's head with such force that it caused air bruising and subdural bleeding in her skull on that side. He shook the little girl's head backwards and forwards so violently that she lost consciousness, the little girl dying from brain damage. On the date mentioned, Newell Mark Fellows and David Taylor all allegedly battered Bevan to death. For both Newell and Fellows, that makes 3 murders each if they're guilty. For Newell, that makes 2 prison murders if he's guilty. I couldn't find out anything about David Taylor, but he too is a murderer. Fellows is both a giver and receiver of brutality. Known as the Iceman, he was a contract killer from Warrington who, in return for pay, shot dead 2 Northwest drug kingpins, Paul Massey in 2015 and John Kinsella in 2018. He got his whole life order, life without parole, in 2019 and had to be airlifted to hospital later that same year after being viciously attacked by another prisoner with a makeshift blade. The man dishes out prison savagery, the man receives prison savagery, and so does Newell. If Newell is convicted for Kyle Bevan's murder, you see, that will be his 2nd prison murder. In February 2013 at HMP Long Lartin, where he was doing time for his first murder, he and another convicted murderer by the name of Gary Smith walked into the cell of a man called Subhan Anwar. He was doing time for the murder of his girlfriend's 2-year-old toddler daughter, picked up his pyjamas, wrapped them around his neck and squeezed the life out of him. As a result of what was for both perpetrators that 2nd murder, both men got a whole life order. And then in November 2014, in something of a karmic twist, Newell was nearly kicked to death by 6'7" giant Gary Vinter. Vinter was frustrated that the transfer to a prison with a better gym that he had requested wasn't happening. The man being, like Newell, a double murderer doing a whole life order. As a result of that beating from Vinter, Newell went blind in one eye and he was awarded £85,000 compensation. Even now, blind in one eye, in his mid-50s, already having done 2 murders, he's up for more bloodshed. It's a truth universally acknowledged that a criminal that's treated with leniency will go on to re-offend because they've got no fear, and in addition, their offending will tend to escalate, often up to the ultimate crime. He essayed and murdered an 8-year-old girl, got into a car chase when the police came for him, got his sentence reduced not once but twice, and keeps surviving the many prison attacks that he suffered during his time behind bars. There are so many other reasons why everyone hates Roy Whiting as well, but those are the main ones. What red flags then did the man show to indicate that he would go on to kill a little girl? On the 4th of March 1995, at a point when the man was 36, he abducted and essayed an 8-year-old girl in Langley Green, which is in Crawley, Sussex, South East England. He was arrested several weeks later after a man who knew him came forward after hearing that the abductor's car was a red Ford Sierra, which matched the description of the car that Roy Whiting had just sold. The vehicle was traced by police to its new owner and a knife was found hidden in it. The abductor had told his victim that he had a knife and the abductor, as I say, was Roy Whiting. In court on the 23rd of June 1995, Whiting pled guilty to charges of abduction and indecent assault and he got 4 years in prison. The maximum sentence that he could have got was life imprisonment. However, because he pled guilty, the sentence came all the way down to 4 years, and I'll tell you something else, he didn't even do as many as 4 years. After the man was convicted, a psychiatrist examined him and warned that he was likely to re-offend when he was released. So far we've had 2 red flags, his prior conviction and that psychiatric assessment. And as for the remaining red flag, he was let out after 2 years and 5 months of his 4-year sentence. And the only reason he did an extra 5 months, because otherwise he would have been released halfway through, was because, and here's your final red flag, he refused to participate in a sex offender rehabilitation programme. And honestly, I think that speaks for itself. As for the murder that the man committed, on the 1st of July 2000, 8-year-old Sarah Payne, who lived in Hersham in Surrey, South East England, was playing in a cornfield near the home of her grandfather with her 2 elder brothers, who were 13 and 11 respectively, and her younger sister, who was 5. There was some sort of quarrel between the siblings and it really upset Sarah. She stormed off, went away from the cornfield, got onto the road and was snatched by Roy Whiting, who was in his car. One of Sarah's brothers had since gone after her, and he got to the road just as Roy Whiting was driving away with Sarah. And he reported, this brother of Sarah's, that Whiting had looked at him and grinned and then sped off. Sarah's body was discovered in a shallow grave in a field near Pulborough, West Sussex, on the 17th of July 2000. By then, police had already questioned Whiting but didn't have enough evidence against him. They soon found that the alibi that he'd given them was false, came for him again. He nicked a Vauxhall Nova and led the police on a chase which culminated when the man crashed into a parked car. After the man was found guilty, which came in December 2001, he was sentenced to a whole life order. For reasons that I couldn't trace, a year later, Home Secretary of the time David Blunkett reduced the man's sentence from a whole life order to 50 years. That would have meant that the man had to be 92 before he could apply for parole, and there was every chance that he could have died before then. But then what happened was Soham. Ian Huntley, a double child murderer who came from Soham in Cambridge, got 40 years for 2 murders. And on that basis, Whiting got his sentence reduced again down to the same 40 years that Huntley got. There are other reasons cited for that further sentence reduction, but the reason I've just offered was definitely one of them. In 2002, Whiting got slashed with a razor. In 2011, he got stabbed in the eye with a sharpened toilet brush handle. And then in 2018, he got stabbed by 2 other prisoners. And then in 2024, he was again attacked. This time, though, his injuries were described as just minor. Mick Philpott saw his girlfriend and his children as chattel and felt entitled to use them in a completely expendable way, including to the point of murder.
I've actually been down to our home, and what we saw, we just cannot believe it.
Mick Philpott and his wife Mairead, the couple that we're watching, aren't shedding a single tear. Their tissues are no more than props, and the man's tone is calm and matter of fact, no emotion whatsoever to it. Mairead keeps her head down most of the time as well because, as is doubtless, that gives her less acting to do. On the 11th of May 2012, a few days before they held this press conference, together with a family friend by the name of Paul Mosley, Philpott and Mairead set the fire to their home, which claimed the lives of their 6 children and which earned them this travesty of a press conference. Philpott was behind the whole plot. His reason for his act was demented, and in 2025 he got a good hiding from another inmate. Philpott's prior criminal convictions were all for serious acts of violence against his previous girlfriends. There was an occasion in the late 70s when the man was in his late teens to early 20s when he shot his then girlfriend Kim Hill with a crossbow. On another occasion, he cracked her kneecap with a hammer. Then in July 1978, he stabbed her repeatedly in her sleep before turning the knife on her mother when she came to her daughter's rescue. Philpott's violence was an ongoing behaviour in all his subsequent relationships. When, in 2000, aged 44, he met Mairead Duffy, a 19-year-old single mother, the man had 5 children from 2 women. By 2006, he had another 7, 4 coming from Mairead, the 2 having got married in 2003, and 3 coming from Lisa Willis, his 21-year-old live-in side chick, who, when Philpott moved her into his home, was a 16-year-old single mother. By early 2012, together with Mairead and Lisa's respective pre-Philpott child, the family's 3-bed home in Derby, East Midlands, had 11 children and 3 adults all living there, and somewhere along the way, Philpott had another 6 kids. When, in 2006, Philpott went on the Jeremy Kyle show, he boasted of his unique family setup and proudly proclaimed to live wholly off benefits. For her own part, Mairead hated sharing her husband, but given the man's violent ways, she was too scared to do anything about the situation. Lisa's own act from February 2012, in contrast, of leaving Philpott and taking her children with her, was a crushing blow to the man. His women were his slaves, his children were his property, and they weren't allowed as such to leave him. He thought that by starting a fire in his home, he could convince the police that Lisa was behind it, in line with her alleged repeat threats to do one such thing, Philpott having reported those alleged threats to the police. This would get the man his kids back, since his prior, more normal attempts to get both Lisa and the kids back had failed. The rapid spread of the fire that he, Mairead and Mosley started in their home late on the 11th of May 2012 though, along with the unexpected suffocating smoke, prevented Philpott from fulfilling his plan of rescuing, by means of a ladder, the 6 children that he had at home. The 6 children, aged from 5 to 13, died from smoke inhalation. After doing half of his 17-year sentence for manslaughter and then getting out, in October 2025, at the age of 58, Mosley died from a heart attack. Mairead also got out after doing half of her 17 years and is now living a quiet life by all accounts. As at the time of this recording, Philpott has got around 2 years of his 15 years to do, and he got a taste of his own violent medicine when, in March 2025, a fellow inmate of his at HMP Wakefield approached him from behind and whacked him over the head with a metal container of some kind. I've got no idea why the person attacked him, but Philpott, who was 68 at the time, must know that it could happen again and again. Mark Bridger was a father to many, but that didn't stop him taking the life of a 5-year-old girl. The body of 5-year-old April Jones, who came from Powys in North Wales and who was murdered in 2012, has never been found. The most serious of the multiple prison attacks that her murderer, Mark Bridger, has suffered, the attack in question having left the man needing plastic surgery, was, quite shockingly, all because he wouldn't say where April's body was. Born on the 5th of November 1965, Mark Bridger had a string of convictions stretching back to the mid-80s, mainly for minor offences. When he moved to Powys, he told people that he was ex-SAS. In reality, however, the man had only ever had casual or semi-skilled jobs and had never been in the army. Having all of 6 children, Bridger had no fewer than 4 baby mothers, including the one to whom he had once been married. On the evening of the 1st of October 2012, on seeing April Jones playing outside her house, Bridger coaxed her to join him in his van and go off for a drive. A 7-year-old witness reported that when April climbed into the van, she was smiling and looked happy. On that point, in court several months later, the judge himself said that April wouldn't have been scared of Bridger, partly because he had some charm and she may well have seen him around her estate, and partly because he told her his son was a friend of her brother. Notwithstanding, less than 24 hours after April's mother's report of her daughter's disappearance, which came shortly after Bridger abducted April, the police came for Bridger. Bridger's story regarding April's disappearance was that he had accidentally run her over, and then, heavily drunk, he'd taken her body somewhere but couldn't remember where. This account, however, didn't tally with the testimony of the 7-year-old that I mentioned earlier. In their search of the man's home, police discovered an extensive collection of child you-know-what on his computer. They also found samples of April's blood in the man's front room and bathroom, while a search of the man's fireplace turned up 17 fragments of April's skull. Bridger pleaded not guilty both to April's abduction and to her murder. He got his whole life order in May 2013 after being found guilty. Bridger had only just been allowed into HMP Wakefield's general population when, in July 2013, 24-year-old juvenile Ferreira slashed him down the face with a knife fashioned out of a razor, causing a deep wound extending from the man's temple to his chin, which required 30 stitches plus some plastic surgery. We can hardly praise the attacker for his act, even if his motive was to get Bridger to reveal the whereabouts of April Jones's body. If for no other reason than that, in 2009, he himself got life for the rape and murder of a woman from Norfolk by the name of Elaine Walpole. For what he did to Bridger, he got 5 years added to his 22-year minimum term. The many prison moves that Bridger has so far undergone are all due to the many attacks that he has suffered, those attacks all being due to the nature of his crimes, the one from juvenile Ferreira being, at the time of this recording, the most serious one so far, and who knows what the future holds. Calling our next Wakefield killer the sleepover killer almost makes it sound like what he did was some sort of joke. Trust me, it was anything but.
I don't know what happened. Come to me.
This guy talks about his acts of murder like he's talking about the weather.
Right, do you just want to undo your coat? Have you armed yourself?
Yeah.
You have?
Have you stabbed yourself, mate?
I can see blood on your hands.
Yeah. Anywhere else? Just my chest, 4 inches in with a bread knife. Can we have a look? And one on the stomach. I bled quite.
Right, do you want to
Can we go down this?
No, just stay there.
I just don't want to be in front of them.
Alright, just go on the corner.
Just walking wounded in a minute.
Alright, stand here. Stay here.
Right.
So
We're told, I know what's going to happen to you now, mate. Well, I know what's going to happen when we go to prison, obviously, but again. Why? What have you done? Have you done something to anyone else? Yeah. What have you done? I've murdered 4 people.
Damien Bendall committed his horrendous acts under the influence of drugs. He murdered, first of all, his girlfriend, who was pregnant with his child. Then he murdered her 2 young children. And then he murdered the school friend of one of the children who was staying over. This all took place in the Derbyshire town of Hellmarsh in September 2021. He also confessed to the rape of one of the children, a little girl. If you need any further convincing of just how remorseless and unempathetic this man is, straight after committing the 4 murders, he went out to sell the Xbox belonging to his girlfriend's son to get money for drugs. Before his relationship with his last girlfriend, whose name was Terry Harris and whose children were called John Bennett and Lacey Bennett, and Lacey Bennett was who the perpetrator raped, and she was 11 at the time. Bendall already had a violent past. He'd been accused of domestic violence by a previous girlfriend of his and had done time in addition for arson. When, early on in their relationship, Terry challenged him over his past, he promised never to hurt her or her children, but according to Terry's mother, Angie Smith, before murdering Terry, he had been behaving abusively towards her for months.
She seemed to watch everything she said around him. He was trying to stop her from coming to see us. Her friends were messaging me saying, we don't hear from her anymore, she doesn't speak to us anymore. My girl was not my girl anymore. He was controlling her.
Do you feel like this whole thing could have been prevented?
Of course he could have, yeah. She wasn't even consulted whether he was allowed to be bailed at her address.
Angie's grief for her daughter and her grandchildren is raw and real.
Lacey was a little ray of sunshine, little poser. John was a real mummy's boy, loved his mum. She loved them kids, them kids were her world. It's just empty now, everything's empty.
Bendall got his whole life order in 2022, but clearly hasn't given up his violent ways. In February 2026, you see, the man got a further life sentence for the attempted murder of a fellow inmate at HMP Frankland, the victim being a man called Michael Mullaney. In a sickening twist to Bendall's attack on Mullaney, the man used the same weapon on Mullaney that he used to murder his pregnant girlfriend, her 2 children and a friend of one of the children back in 2021. A claw hammer. As you can see, the new life sentence that he's been given won't make the blindest bit of difference to the man's future. He's never getting out of prison anyway. Just to confirm, as a result of his act of attempted murder, Bendall was transferred out of Frankland and over to Wakefield. When it comes to the cause of his murderous actions, our next Wakefield lag has quite a lot in common with Damien Bendall. Mark Hobson, a Yorkshireman born in 1969, murdered 4 people in summer 2004, having planned carefully to do so, having prepared carefully to do so. One of his victims was his very own girlfriend, and another was her very own twin sister. Police found things like a to-do note detailing how he planned to lure his girlfriend's twin sister to his flat, plus a shopping list for things like big bin liners, tape, tie wraps, fly spray and air freshener. This was no lapse of judgment, you need to understand, no moment of madness. He thoroughly meant to do what he did. Working as a bin man, Hobson was an alcoholic and a drug addict. Beyond those 2 vices of his, I wasn't able to trace why he did what he did. For many years though, Hobson was just a normal bloke next door. He got married in 1993 to a woman who'd been his childhood sweetheart, and yet they hadn't been together from the time they, had a crush on each other, because when they got married, she already had 2 children from another relationship. While he was married, he apparently was the perfect husband and the perfect father. That's what his then-to-be ex-wife said of him. He had regular jobs, but then suddenly on New Year's Day in 1999, with no forewarning and no explanation, he walked out on his family, and his reason, if any, was that he just wasn't interested in family life anymore, didn't want to be married anymore. Sounds like he suddenly just wanted to be free. By the summer of 2004, he was living in Campbellsforth, North Yorkshire, with his girlfriend, 27-year-old lady called Claire Sanderson. On the 10th of July 2004, he killed Claire. He whacked her on the head no fewer than 17 times with a hammer and strangled her, and then after that, he wrapped her body in bin bags. A plastic bag had also been placed over her head. Interestingly, there was no evidence of recent sexual activity between the two, so he didn't grape her. It wasn't a matter of dominating her in absolutely every way he could. He literally just wanted her dead for reasons, as I say, that I can't explain. 7 days later, on the 17th of July, he called Claire's sister, Diane, who, as I mentioned earlier, was Claire's twin, and told her that Claire had glandular fever and wanted her to come over and visit. When Diane got there, Hobson whacked her over the head with a hammer, and then before that though, he tortured her, with a disposable razor and scissors, and he had hogtied her, and her left nipple, he completely bit it off. It is believed by police that the man ate the thing. The cause of Diane's death was strangulation, and just like her sister had been, her head was also covered with a plastic bag, and ligatures were found on her wrists, ankles and neck. Her pubic hair had been shaved, and this time, she had been essayed. This time then, the man did mean to dominate and destroy her in every way possible. The following day, Hobson went and murdered an elderly couple, James and Joan Britton, in their home in Strensall in York. York is also in North Yorkshire. Hobson was arrested at a petrol station on the 25th of July 2004. This was in the village of Shipton by Benningborough, near York, and there had been, as you might imagine, a huge manhunt to get him. The attendant at the petrol station recognised him and thankfully contacted the police. They found the man hiding between a thorn bush and a septic tank behind an upholstery shop. On being arrested, Hobson said to the police, "I'm an effing killer, aren't I?" Or probably it was more like, "I'm an effing killer, aren't I?" Okay, that was probably the lousiest impersonation of a Yorkshire accent you've ever heard in your life. Having pled guilty in April 2005 at Leeds Crown Court, Hobson got a whole life order, a forever, never-ending prison sentence. He tried to appeal it, but it failed. One of the first things he did once he got sent to prison, which was Wakefield, was to kettle child murderer Ian Huntley. Kettling, which I think might also be known as either sugaring and or napalming, means chucking boiling water containing sugar over somebody, and the sugar serves to melt the skin and make the whole horrific thing so much more painful and so much more difficult to treat, and it usually leaves you with the most horrendous scarring. In case you happen not to know, the Soham murderer Ian Huntley, who killed two little girls, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, in August 2002 and got a 40-year sentence, was murdered in prison on the 26th of February 2026 by another murderer by the name of Anthony Russell, who killed 3 people in a single week in October 2020, and that includes a pregnant woman who he did a certain thing to before killing her. And keep in mind, he knew that she was 5 months pregnant because she had shown him her baby scan. Wakefield Prison then has been Hobson's home since 2005. Before Jamie Reynolds committed his act of murder, he was basically known by social services and by the police as a flipping psycho. The act of murder perpetrated by 22-year-old Jamie Reynolds, a shop worker from Shropshire in the West Midlands, against 17-year-old Georgia Williams, a policeman's daughter, on the 26th of May 2013, came from the antagonist's long-held sexual fantasies and their long-planned moment of fulfilment. Reynolds dreamed of and planned and fulfilled a scenario in which, after hanging a girl until she died, he would indulge in necro-thingy with her corpse. In preparation for these acts, the perpetrator bought the clothing in which the girl would be dressed, the rope that he would use to hang her, and the handcuffs with which he would restrain her and make her helpless. Likewise, he built a hanging mechanism from the loft aperture in his home, the noose being slung over an oar placed across the opening and tied at one end to the banisters. When the man invited Georgia, his friend, over to his home on the pretext of having her do a photo shoot with him, this coming when his parents went away for a week, Georgia willingly accepted. She fully trusted him then when he persuaded her to dress in the clothes that he had bought, to stand on a box underneath the loft aperture, to have the noose placed around her neck, and to submit to being restrained by the use of handcuffs while he photographed her over and over. Sometime in, Reynolds suddenly pulled the noose tight, using considerable force to do so, securing Georgia's death by hanging, by forcing her backwards, using his knee in her back as a lever, and, no doubt, kicking away the box on which she'd been standing. He then, as he had envisaged, enjoyed the spectacle of her final ghastly minutes as she struggled for life, knowing that she had been betrayed and that she was facing death. Minutes later, he was taking photographs of his victim lying dead on a bed, and then he was taking further photographs of his acts of SA on the body. He then spent an hour repeatedly graping the body before transporting it downstairs into the living room, where he then spent the next few hours violating it time and again. He photographed himself naked with the similarly naked corpse several times. During the immediate aftermath, furthermore, while taking photographs of Georgia's body, the perpetrator had the presence of mind to communicate with 2 other young women who he had lined up as prospective victims, to cancel arrangements for them to come to his house the following day, no doubt for the same purpose. The antagonist had somehow managed to obtain the password to Georgia's phone, and, after murdering her, he used it to text her mother from her phone in an elaborate deceit to give the impression that she had left his home voluntarily and safely and had gone somewhere else for the night. He repeated this act a number of times, his final text to Georgia's mother containing what can only be described as a veiled reference to what he had done to Georgia. This wasn't just about buying himself time to escape. It was about playing games with Georgia's family, feeling powerful against them by doing so, and deriving an enormous sense of satisfaction and sadistic pleasure from that. After being arrested up in Glasgow in Scotland 6 days later, because that's where he scarpered after dumping Georgia's body in a remote area near Wrexham in North Wales, Reynolds denied guilt for Georgia's murder all the way up to the 2nd of December of that same year, 2013, day 1 of his trial, when he changed his plea to guilty. When Reynolds did what he did to Georgia, he had on his computer 16,800 images and 72 videos, all depicting violent you-know-whatography. Some of the images were of Georgia and of other girls that he knew, with a noose digitally added to their necks. Reynolds had actually long since become known to police for his violent behaviour, having tried in 2008 to strangle a girl and then going on in 2011 to drive his car into that of a girl who had rejected his advances. While both these acts of Reynolds were reported to police, nothing much happened to the man, despite the fact that both the Justice Liaison Service and the police themselves had notice of the violent you-know-whatography that Reynolds had viewed. The two said agencies just didn't take the matter sufficiently seriously, and the girls, all of whom the killer knew, including Georgia herself, weren't warned. Several agencies were involved with Reynolds, in fact, but there was no coordinated approach to managing him or monitoring him, and consequently, not only were the people in the man's life unaware of the man's disturbing acts and interests, the man was largely left to his own devices. In the aftermath of the man's conviction for the murder of Georgia Williams, media sources stated that the murder could have been prevented if police and social services had acted on information that they had received about Reynolds, which would have led to him being monitored and potentially registered as a sex offender when at liberty, even if he hadn't been jailed for those offences. For his own part, Mr. Justice Wilkie, who was in charge of Reynolds' trial, said the young man, quote, had the potential to progress into become a serial killer, unquote, and was likely to remain a danger to women for the rest of his life. These assertions of his came from the psychiatrist reports provided to him ahead of the perpetrator's sentencing hearing. On the 19th of December 2013, Reynolds got a whole life prison sentence, also known as a whole life order. He's never getting out, and he is the second youngest person ever to get that sentence. John Cooper, our next Wakefield lag, is known as the Bullseye Killer, and you're about to see why. John William Cooper, who was born in 1944, is also known as the Bullseye Killer, and he's a Welsh serial killer. On the 26th of May 2011, he was given a whole life order for the 1985 double murder of siblings Richard and Helen Thomas, and for the 1989 double murder of Peter and Gwenda Dixon. The murders were known in the media as the Pembrokeshire murders or the Coastal murders, because that's where the murders took place, and because of those murders, tourism in that area dropped dramatically. Cooper was also sentenced for the rape of a 16-year-old girl and a sexual assault on a 15-year-old girl, both of those attacks having been carried out while a group of 5 teenagers were held at gunpoint in March 1996 in a wooded area behind the Mount Estate in Cooper's hometown of Milford Haven in Pembrokeshire. There was literally nothing nice or good about this man. He actually got his first police records between the ages of 17 and 21, and it was for theft of a vehicle, assaulting a police officer, being drunk and disorderly, and ABH. His marriage came shortly after this point, 1966 being when, decades later, his wife died. Knowing as they then did that her husband was a killer, people feared that Cooper had offed her. The woman's death, however, came from natural causes. Giving his daughter away at her own wedding could well be the only kind thing that Cooper ever did for anyone. His son, who he used to batter and bully, having long since disowned him. Cooper once took aim at his son, literally, with a gun and pulled the trigger, delighting, no doubt, in his son's evident fear, which came from his belief that the gun was loaded, which, thankfully, it wasn't. In 1978, Cooper won all of 90,000 quid, around £500,000 in today's money, and he won that on the pools, while also winning a £4,000 car, an Austin Princess, on a Spot the Ball competition. A few short years after, though, every last penny was gone, Cooper having blown it all on racing bets and having become a heavy drinker during this period as well. As for Cooper's double murder of 1989, his second one to remind you. The police could have nabbed the perpetrator within days of discovering the bodies of Mr. and Mrs. Dixon. For some reason, however, they swallowed Cooper's story that the wedding ring that he had recently sold was none other than his very own. They don't seem to have asked to see a picture of it or have tried to trace the buyer, for instance, probes which may well have led them to learn that the ring in question was of course Mr. Dixon's. Police had seen that it was missing from the murder victim's finger. Cooper was in prison for numerous burglary offences when, in 2006, the police conducted a cold case review of the murder of the Dixons. When police revealed to Cooper that they had found Mr. Dixon's DNA on a pair of Cooper's shorts, ones that he had taken out of Mr. Dixon's rucksack and then kept after killing Mr. Dixon, and also on his shotgun, Cooper tried to frame his son. He said that his lad always used to take his clothes and wear them without his permission. Another piece of evidence against Cooper was an artist's impression of the perpetrator, which proved to be almost a direct match with the way the perpetrator looked when he went on the game show Bullseye, the episode in question having aired only days after Cooper murdered the Dixons. Personally though, I'd say at least 1,000 other men could have been a match for the artist's sketch. Anyway, White House Farm, Essex. That was the setting of this slaughter of a family of 5, and the perpetrator was one of their own. In the early hours of the 7th of August 1985, near the village of Tolly's-Hunt Darcy in Essex, southeast England, Newell and Jean Bamber, both 61, their adopted daughter Sheila Caffell, 28, and Sheila's 6-year-old twin sons Daniel and Nicholas Caffell were all shot dead in their home, White House Farm. The only member of the immediate family to survive the night was the adopted son, Jeremy Bamber, who was then aged 24 and who, luckily for him, had been at his own home in the nearby village of Goldfinger when the mass murder took place. The police were first alerted to a disturbance at White House Farm when, at 3 a.m. on the 7th of August, Jeremy himself called them, claiming to have just received a distressing call from his father, telling him that his sister had gone berserk and that she had a gun.
My father's phoned from White House Farm and he sounded really frightened. He says, my sister's gone crazy and she's got a gun.
Jeremy added that after he himself heard a shot being fired, the line had gone dead. In his call to the police, Jeremy referred to his sister as a nutter. This was a reference to the lady's recent diagnosis of schizophrenia. Initially, the police wrote this devastating set of murders up as murder-suicide. When they went to investigate, you see, they found the body of Sheila Caffell with blood oozing from her throat and with the semi-automatic rifle belonging to Newell, with which all the murders had been perpetrated, lying so as to be pointing towards Sheila's throat. One of Jeremy's cousins, however, whose name is Anne Eaton, discovered 3 days after the killings that the silencer to the murder weapon was in a cupboard in the home instead of being on the rifle, which is where it had always been kept. It seemed very unlikely to Anne and to other members of the family that Sheila would have murdered everyone with the silencer on the rifle and then thoughtfully gone and put the silencer away before shooting herself. They also estimated that keeping the silencer on the rifle would have made the rifle too long for Sheila to reach the trigger in order to shoot herself in the face. It also emerged that Sheila had not 1 bullet wound to the face, but 2, which, as you can see, makes it even less likely that she shot herself. It's also hard to believe, I'd say, that instead of calling the police or trying to save either his family or himself when his daughter started shooting everyone, Newell Bamber chose to call his son instead. How could he have done any such thing with bullet after bullet flying around his head, for instance? Jeremy Bamber murdered his entire immediate family for the substantial inheritance that he stood to gain after doing so. Straight after the funerals, which took place a few days after the killings, the young man not only went on a windsurfing holiday with his girlfriend, Julie Mugford, but also did lots and lots of partying besides that. That doesn't sound like grief or sadness to me. It was Julie's very report to the police some weeks later, when she and Jeremy had split up, of Jeremy's year-long plan to do away with his whole family and frame his sister, that triggered a renewed police probe into the massacre, which led, in October 1986, to Jeremy's conviction for the killings and to the whole life prison sentence for the perpetrator that came with that. The Wedding Day Killer. That's how our next Wakefield killer is known. Here's his story. For committing 3 murders plus grape, all in a single sitting, Arthur Hutchinson, who was born in Hartlepool, North East England in February 1941, has been locked up since 1983. From 1969 to 1983, Hutchinson was in and out of prison for offences like SE hex with underage girls, firearm possession, and the attempted murder of his half-brother, Dino. On the morning of the 28th of September 1983, after being arrested on suspicion of theft, burglary and grape, Hutchinson arrived at Selby Police Station in North Yorkshire. After tricking police officers into removing his handcuffs so that he could go to the toilet, he made a dastardly escape by jumping through a closed window. Landing on a barbed wire fence, as he did, only added, of course, to the injuries that he sustained from the window's broken glass, the man suffering a particularly nasty injury to one of his 2 knees. On the 22nd of October 1983, Hutchinson sighted, in the garden of a home in Dore, South Yorkshire, a large marquee. This was where 59-year-old Basil Leitner, his 55-year-old wife Avril, their 28-year-old son Richard, and their 18-year-old daughter Nicola had, earlier that day, held the wedding party of the couple's other daughter, Suzanne. After entering the marquee in search of food, Hutchinson broke into Richard's bedroom and stabbed him to death. When the perpetrator was confronted by Richard's father, Basil, at the top of the stairs, he stabbed him as well, the man ending up at the bottom of the stairs after falling backwards. Hutchinson then stabbed Richard's mother, Avril, in the downstairs bedroom before going back upstairs and raping Nicola at knife point, first in her room, then out in the marquee, and then once again back in her room. To get Nicola from her room to the marquee and back again, the perpetrator had walked her past the dead bodies of her mother, father and brother. After being caught on the 5th of November 1983, shockingly, the perpetrator was only sentenced at the conclusion of his trial that was held in September 1984 to 18 years. Thankfully, the Home Secretary of the time, Leon Britton, subsequently upgraded the sentence to a whole life term, and Hutchinson's many appeals against that tariff have all failed. If you happen to need convincing that serial killers often learn their trade, if you like, by being cruel to animals, this next Wakefield lag story should convince you. Around 5 p.m. on Sunday the 26th of November 2000, on her way through an isolated and unlit path known as Howley Gill, Leanne Tiernan, a 16-year-old schoolgirl who came from Bramley in Leeds, West Yorkshire, disappeared. She took the said path as a shortcut home after going Christmas shopping with her friend, Sarah Whitehouse. The man who grabbed Leanne from behind, forced her over to his house, essayed her and then strangled her to death with a scarf and a cable tie, was, like Jamie Reynolds, long obsessed with tying women up, sexually bleep-ating them, and then murdering them in a notably up-close and personal way. The search for Leanne became the largest that West Yorkshire had ever carried out. More than 1,000 properties were searched, a 3-mile stretch of canal was drained, and rubbish collections were halted while police looked for Leanne. Leanne's family made public appeals, and police released an e-fit of a man who'd been seen walking a small dog in the area. The man wasn't a regular dog walker in the area, but he'd been seen several times near where Leanne went missing before her disappearance. He hadn't been seen walking his dog in that area since Leanne's disappearance, however. Leanne's body was found 8 months later in Lindley Woods in North Yorkshire, several miles away from the crime scene, by a local dog walker called Mark Hobson. The body was wrapped in a duvet cover and in green dustbin liners. The head was covered by a black plastic bag, which was held in place by a dog collar. A scarf and a plastic cable tie had been tied around the neck, while the wrists were tied together with cable ties. What the body didn't offer up, though, was any DNA belonging to the perpetrator. Even so, police went to great lengths to trace people in Bramley who had bought a dog collar matching the one found on Leanne's body. They contacted more than 100 pet shops and suppliers before they were successful, and eventually made contact with a company who kept computerised records of all customers, including those supplied by mail order. One of those customers had bought a number of dog collars similar to the one found on Leanne's body, and he lived in Bramley. His name was John Taylor. When the same name appeared from two separate lines of inquiry, it was impossible to ignore. John Taylor became the prime suspect. Upon further inquiries, police discovered that 44-year-old John Taylor, who was born in 1958, was a parcel force employee and lived within a mile of where Leanne was abducted. Taylor was known locally as the Pet Man. He had kept various animals at home, such as dogs and ferrets, and was a keen poacher. He was divorced with children. The fact that John Taylor worked at Parcel Force was also significant, as some of the cable ties found on Leanne's body were supplied almost exclusively to Parcel Force's parent company, Royal Mail. Police began searching Taylor's house with a fine-tooth comb. They found cable ties and a dog collar, identical to those found with Leanne's body. They also found some pink carpet fibres that matched ones that had been found on Leanne's jumper, and some of Leanne's blood under some of the floorboards. Police were spot on when, given the methodical way in which Taylor had carried out Leanne's murder and then successfully covered it up for as long as he had, they surmised that Leanne's murder wasn't the man's first violent crime. On the 18th of October 1988, armed with a mask and a knife, Taylor attacked a 32-year-old woman as she walked across some waste ground near Howley Gill. After forcing her to commit an sexual act on him, disguising words, YouTube doesn't like certain words, he raped her. 5 months later, on the 1st of March 1989, again wearing a mask and armed with a knife, the man broke into a 21-year-old woman's Bramley home. It was lunchtime and the woman's 18-month-old baby was in another room at the time. Taylor forced the woman into her bedroom, undressed her, blindfolded and gagged her, forced her to perform a sexual act on him, and then raped her, exactly as he had done to his first victim. The exact details of the man's attacks on a further 5 women and girls, all carried out between 1977 and 1996, and involving no fewer than 16 offences, I wasn't able to trace. But they were sadistic sex attacks, all right. When police questioned some of Taylor's ex-girlfriends furthermore, the women revealed stories of Taylor's love of tying women up, his unusual fantasies, and his love of sadomasochistic sex. One woman said that Taylor had told her of his desire to have sex with her 15-year-old daughter. Violence against animals is often a characteristic of murderers, and police soon found evidence of Taylor's lengthy history of cruelty against the many ferrets and dogs that he had owned. When Leanne's body was found, it had only been in Lindley Woods for a short time. What nobody can confirm, though, is whether Taylor's act of storing the body in his freezer for the many months before he dumped it in Lindley Woods, as he had done, was to avoid detection for the murder or to have it as a trophy of the murder. Taylor got his life sentence for Leanne's kidnap and murder, both of which he had pleaded guilty to in July 2002, then another sentence in April 2003 for his 2 acts of grape from the late 80s, and then in October 2018 he got a whole life prison sentence coming from all his other offending, the sex attacks that he committed on 5 other women and girls between 1977 and 1996. One of the HMP Belmarsh house guests that you're about to meet committed a triple murder with an extremely rare sort of weapon. Another shot a police officer dead, none other than in a police custody suite. Our first case, though, has got to be Britain's most hated prisoner, Axel Rudakubana.
We've got no information to suggest there's anything other than this person involved. He's in custody. There's a knife up there. He's been disarmed.
Any more kids in there?
Instead of being calm and still as he is now, moments before now, 17-year-old Axel Rudakubana was behaving very differently.
Take his arm over there, mate. Yeah.
The brazen and unprovoked knife attack that he's just carried out in a dance club in Southport, northwest England, having left 10 people, including 8 little girls, badly injured, while 3 little girls have lost their lives. The perpetrator didn't pay the taxi that he took on the morning of the 29th of July 2024 from his home to the dance club, having armed himself before leaving home with a kitchen knife. When he invaded the dance studio where a Taylor Swift themed activity was taking place, the little girls were sitting at tables making friendship bracelets. The perpetrator immediately started stabbing people and tried to behead 7-year-old Elsie Stankham. Alongside Elsie, Alice Aguiar, age 9, and BB King, age 6, ended up murdered. The perpetrator inflicted serious injuries on 8 other girls as well as on 2 adults, and for legal reasons only the injuries suffered by the 2 adults were allowed to be presented to us in videos of the sentencing hearing. Even then, I can only find you about half the clip relating to the injuries suffered by an adult organiser called Leanne Lucas, who was in charge of all of the girls.
She tried to save as many children as she could. Leaning over them, Rudakubana attacked her also. She did all she could before escaping, but suffered 5 stab wounds to her head, neck, back, shoulder blade and arm. She required a blood transfusion. She also suffered fractures to a spinal vertebrae, a rib, a shoulder blade, and all caused by severe force. And Jonathan Hayes was an adult working in a different part of the upstairs to the building. After he heard the disturbance, he went out to see what had happened and was attacked with a knife. Rudakubana stabbed him in the leg, causing a deep wound as he tried to kill him. He was only saved when another witness appeared.
As for the injuries inflicted on the 8 other girls that Rudakubana attacked, who all, as I say, thankfully survived, Child 1, or C1, was aged 7. She almost managed to escape, but Rudakubana was seen to pull her back into the building and attack her. He stabbed her 32 times, including 23 to her back and arms, causing her life-threatening injuries. Fortunately, she survived, having collapsed outside. And frankly, that basically tells you the sorts of things that the perpetrator did to the other 7 girls as well. We'll move on. Once the perpetrator was in police custody, the police having arrived only minutes after the youth's deadly rampage began, he declared repeatedly that he was glad that the children were dead. When police subsequently raided the boy's home, they found another knife identical to the one that the youth had used in his attack. They also found a stash of castor beans, together with all the equipment needed to convert them into the deadly toxin ricin, which is a weapon of mass murder. The youth's devices, meanwhile, contained a terror training manual from an Islamic terror group, along with numerous images of genocide and mass violence. Axel Rudakubana's savage attack on the dance club triggered 4 days of rioting across the UK, and people were jailed for Facebook posts and tweets that allegedly broke the laws relating to free speech. After changing his plea to his charges of murder and attempted murder from not guilty to guilty on the first day of his trial, the 20th of January 2025, in his sentencing hearing that came 3 days later, the perpetrator no less behaved with childishness and contempt for his victims. Due to constantly shouting out and claiming to be sick, to be exact, he was removed from the dock several times until the judge, Mr. Justice Goose from Liverpool Crown Court, deemed it necessary for him to be kicked out of the courtroom for good.
During this sentence hearing, Axel Rudakubana was determined to disrupt the proceedings so that he would not have to face the victims of his crimes and justice. I was required to have him removed from court, not because that is what he wanted, but he was preventing the hearing from being held in the normal way. Accordingly, I passed sentence in his voluntary absence, whilst his counsel, both leading and junior, and solicitor are present in court.
In reference to the sentence that Mr Justice Couzens subsequently imposed on the perpetrator, the judge made no bones about either his desire to lock the youth up forever or his belief that being locked up forever, even though that isn't the sentence imposed, is exactly what lies in store for the murderer.
He's a UK citizen, now aged 18, but was still 17 when he committed these offences. He was only 9 days short of his 18th birthday, which has a particular significance. Had he been 18, I make it clear that I would have been compelled to impose on him life imprisonment without a minimum term, otherwise known as a whole life term, meaning that he would never be released. However, the law does not permit such a sentence for those offenders who are under 18 when they offend. The minimum term I will fix will be a very substantial one, and the very least he will be detained, which will mean that he will serve almost the whole of his life in custody. I consider at this time that it is likely he will never be released, and that he will be in custody for all his life. I'm now going to sentence Axel Rudakubana, having explained my reasons. On counts 1 to 3 murder, I sentence him to custody for life, with a minimum term which he must serve in custody of 52 years, less the time he's served already. He's been in custody for 175 days on remand, which will be credited. Therefore, the minimum term is 51 years and 190 days.
On the 8th of May 2025 at HMP Belmarsh, his home, the perpetrator threw boiling water over a prison guard. The killer hasn't changed, and it's looking at this point like his 52-year minimum term will turn into a whole life order, and hey, I don't think there'll be many people who'll be mourning that.
The evidence I have heard shows you to be a jealous man, soaked in self-pity, a man who holds women in utter contempt.
That's putting it mildly, Mr Justice Benethan. This is the judge who sentenced Kyle Clifford for the 3 horrendous murders that he committed on the 9th of July 2024, his sentencing having come in March 2025. This triple killer is going to cost the taxpayer millions because he's paralysed. That means in prison he needs lots of extra care. He paralysed himself in a failed suicide attempt that he made just before he got arrested for the murder of his ex-girlfriend Louise Hunt, her mother Carol, and another sister in the family, Hannah. He committed those murders in the home of his ex-girlfriend on the 9th of July 2024. In addition, he raped Louise and held her captive for 2 hours before murdering her, and the judge of his trial said it must have become obvious to Louise in the course of her captivity that Clifford had already killed her mother. During his police interview, the perpetrator, of course, showed nothing other than cowardice in combination with contempt for his 3 victims.
Do you accept, Kyle, that based on the evidence that this is a premeditated murder of 3 people?
No comment.
Do you accept that you have meticulously planned this murder from the moment that you split up Louise?
No comment.
From the moment that she sent you that text message at the end of June, you began to plan her murder? Yes?
No comment.
It's evident quite clearly from your purchase of the crossbow, from your purchase of the additional bolts, from the purchase of the gun and the knife in the 2 weeks leading up to the murders. Do you agree?
No comment.
Do you agree that it shows that you only had one thing in mind, and that planning began when you purchased these items? You purchased rope and you purchased duct tape in order to restrain Louise and Hannah and Carol, didn't you? 5-6 days before this happened, you make these significant purchases that really only have one plausible explanation, didn't you? The only plausible explanation is that they were purchased in order for you to carry out these murders. Do you agree?
No comment.
Clifford is in fact the second murderer in his family. His big brother, Bradley, is, as at the time of this recording, doing 23 years for murdering an 18-year-old man called Soham Khan for breaking the wing mirror of his Ford Mustang. A fanatic of graphically violent videos, after his brother's incarceration, Kyle Clifford joined the army, but please don't think for a minute that the man holds any level of either valour or devotion to his country.
You have been referred to at times as a former soldier. In many cases that would serve as significant mitigation. Not so in your case, however, as your 2 years in the army included 286 days at home claiming to be ill. You never saw active service, and your utility to the armed forces can be gleaned in a parting comment from your commanding officer that, quote, his character is wholly unsuited to military employment, and he has no care nor concern beyond himself.
The average prisoner cost the taxpayer around 55,000 quid a year. Given all his additional care needs and given how long his sentence is, Clifford, who was 26 when he was sentenced, stands, as I mentioned earlier, to cost the taxpayer an absolute fortune.
This is no occasion to subject the family and friends of your victims to any delay or suspense. I therefore make clear at once that for each of these 3 murders, the sentence will be one of life imprisonment with a whole life order. That means a sentence from which you will never be released.
With all of 22 murders to his name, our next antagonist is clearly far more evil than those that we've already met. And yet, the main focus of his presentation will be his prison violence. Just watch. What many of us may not have known when we heard of the attack from the 12th of April 2025 on 3 prison guards at HMP Frankland, County Durham, by terrorist mass murderer Hashim Abedi was that, where assaulting prison staff is concerned, that wasn't the 28-year-old's first rodeo, so to speak. For reasons that as yet remain unclear, on the said date, Abedi threw boiling hot cooking oil on 3 prison guards, one of which being a woman, before stabbing the 3 officers with a makeshift knife. While the woman guard was discharged from hospital later that day, the other 2 guards were kept in for treatment of the serious burn and stab wounds that they had sustained. Meanwhile, back in May 2020, alongside fellow convicted terrorists Ahmed Hassan and Mohammed Saeed, the killer stormed the office of HMP Belmarsh prison guard Paul Edwards, aged 57, and whacked him with an office chair. After the man fell to the floor, the 3 attackers viciously kicked and punched him again and again. As well as suffering lacerations to his scalp, Mr. Edwards was left with a bruised back and rib cage, along with lasting damage to his hearing. As to why Abedi and his 2 accomplices did what they did to Mr. Edwards, it transpired that, sometime before their attack on the guard, Abedi and Hassan had been moved from the prison's standard privileges regime to a basic one, clearly inferior standard, because they had changed their appearance without permission, shaving their heads having been how. As a result of this, the 2 forfeited their access to televisions and game consoles and had their exercise sessions shortened, these restrictions being, naturally, what a prisoner gets in a basic regime. As you've probably already guessed, Mr. Edwards was the officer who downgraded the 2 men's regime. As a result of Abedi's attack on the prison guard Mr. Edwards, he was moved to HMP Frankland. However, 4 days after his subsequent attack on prison guards at HMP Frankland, the man was moved back to HMP Belmarsh, since that was the only prison in the country with a highly controlled suite cell, that's S-U-I-T-E, available. A suite cell is a standalone self-contained unit which is monitored by a minimum of 5 people plus a dog at any one time. There are only 4 such cells across England and Wales. Belmarsh, meanwhile, is considered the most high-security prison in the UK. Abedi was convicted of the terrorist attack at an Ariana Grande concert at Manchester Arena in May 2017, in which 22 people, including a girl of 8, were killed. The killer carried out the attack with his brother, suicide bomber Salman Abedi, who, as I think you've probably gathered, was killed by his own murderous acts. having been given a 55-year minimum term because at that point he was too young to get a whole life order, and he got that sentence in August 2020. He has since had that term extended by virtually another 4 years, and even without that 4-year extension, I think it's safe to say that Hashim Abedi was never going to be released anyway. Known as the Grinder Killer, Stephen Port not only murdered 4 innocent young men, he played the police themselves in the process.
Were you involved in administering any drugs or poisons or noxious substances to him?
No, I don't administer drugs to anyone or give drugs to anyone. That's done at the party boy.
Stephen Port, who was born in 1975, is not only a serial killer but also a serial rapist. Between 2014 and 2015, Port murdered 4 young men that he met online. He'd get them to come over to his flat over in Barking in East London, and there he would drug them with GHB, gamma hydroxybutyric acid, quite a well-known date grape drug, and then of course grape them. And all 4 victims died from an overdose of the drug. In the case of one victim, Port inserted the drug, or rather injected it, directly into the man's you-know-what hole.
So did you have any involvement in the death of the male that we just spoke about a short while ago, Gabriel Klein?
No, I didn't.
At all. Were you involved in administering any drugs or poisons or noxious substances to him?
No, I don't administer drugs to anyone or give drugs to anyone. That's done at the party boy.
Might help if I show you a picture. I'll call this CRT. See, this is Jack Taylor. Do you recognise that, mate?
No. No, I just don't recognise him. I don't pay full attention to the guys' faces when I have paid attention to the parties. But I don't recognise his face.
So you don't recognise his face?
I do not know. No.
And I mean, that's Jack Taylor, so you don't recognise?
No, I don't.
Jack Taylor?
No.
Port reported the death of his first victim to police himself, pretending that he'd just found the victim, student Anthony Walgate, slumped outside his block of flats over in Barking, East London. Soon afterwards, though, he admitted that he'd hooked up with Anthony, but claimed that the young man had accidentally overdosed on self-administered GHB. The police didn't challenge this claim of Port, and even though they no less seized the perpetrator's computer, they didn't discover Port's online searches for the date grape drugs that he loved using and graping unconscious boys, searches that the man made just before hooking up with Anthony, because they didn't bother checking the computer. As regards Port's third victim, Daniel Whitworth, performing a forensic analysis of the bedsheet, which belonged of course to Port, that had been left with Daniel's body, would have led the police straight to Port since they had Port's DNA in their database. The police, however, failed to carry out one such forensic analysis. It took Port's fourth murder for the police to start investigating the series of murders, Port's fourth victim, 25-year-old Jack Taylor, having 2 sisters who did some diligent investigating of their own into their brother's murder, and who eventually got the police to actually do their job. Port got his whole life order in 2016. To this day, though, he apparently denies being a murderer. Our next antagonist went on a murderous rampage in a park in Reading in 2020, all in the name of a thing that he calls God, but what we call sick, murderous stupidity. A Libyan refugee who came to the UK in 2012, 25-year-old Khairi Sadallah had mental health issues, couldn't stay out of prison, admired Islamic terrorists, and on the 20th of June 2020, stabbed to death 3 total strangers in a park in Reading, Berkshire. Why? Because he wanted to please God, Allah to be exact. Even though Sadala was from a wealthy family back in Libya, a member of his family reports that the man sought to escape the violence that ravaged his home country, the killer having developed PTSD as a result of their civil war. Between 2015 and 2019, over here in the UK, Sadala gained 6 convictions relating to as many as 15 crimes, 8 of which having been violent crimes. Sending this refugee back to his home country on account of his criminality, however, would have been a breach of his human rights. A cannabis addict who was radicalised in prison and who was briefly on the radar of MI5, the man had regular visits from a mental health professional. In fact, a day or two before he murdered 3 people who were wholly innocent, he spoke to the police about his ongoing therapy sessions, the police having been asked to look into the man's behaviour by none other than the man's brother.
You're feeling a bit down, feeling a bit unwell?
When?
I don't know. No?
Yesterday, yeah.
You were feeling down yesterday. You were supposed to see the crisis team.
I spoke to them, yeah.
You spoke to them. What did you say?
I spoke to them. They said that they're going to bring me back.
They're going to bring you back?
Yeah.
In court, the prosecution described Sadala's murder of James Furlong, 36, David Wales, 49, and Joe Ritchie Bennett, 39, the 3 men being friends and having all lost their lives in less than a minute at the hands of Sadala, as, quote, highly effective executions, unquote. They added that as a committed jihadist who, as he killed his 3 victims, was heard to clamour in Arabic, God is great and God accept my jihad. The perpetrator planned the attack with determination and precision, intending to kill as many people as possible. In October 2021, Sadala was denied permission to appeal his whole life order, which, following his guilty pleas from November 2020, he picked up in his sentencing hearing of January 2021. Our next antagonist committed a murder in the most surreal of places for reasons that no one can tell.
You're just going to be searched, mate. You're not under arrest. I just need to search you.
We've had the case of Wayne Couzens, a police officer turned murderer. Now we've got the case of Louis Dezoysa.
At 13, he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. His lawyer argued the shooting was a result of an autistic meltdown.
When, on the 25th of September 2020, down in Croydon, South London, police stopped, searched and arrested 23-year-old data analyst Louis Dezoysa, they found that the man was carrying 7 bullets plus some cannabis. There was one other important thing that the man was carrying, though, that the police somehow missed.
Stand up, mate.
He's been a bit...
Go on.
I
think this is it. I don't understand. Stand up.
So please leave.
What?
Please leave. I think I'm going to pass on.
Okay, listen to me. My name's Matt. I'm the custody officer, right? I'm in charge. I'm not involved in the investigation. You've been arrested on suspicion of possession of bullets, ammunition, and possession of intent to supply.
Class B.
Class B. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Your detention's not been authorised yet, but I can authorise a search of you under Section 54 of PACE. Stand up. Mate, you're good enough to...
The 2 shots with which Dezoysa murdered Sergeant Matt Ratana came from the antique revolver that he was carrying on him, but as I say, the police missed it when they searched him on the street. Sergeant Matt Ratana left behind his partner and his child, and at the age of 55, he was only 3 months away from retirement. Of the 2 further shots that Dezoysa then fired, one got him himself in the neck and caused brain damage, as a result of which he's now in a wheelchair and can't communicate properly. Basically, he can't speak. When, at his sentencing hearing, he tried to use his physical disabilities as an argument for not being given a whole life order, the judge quite rightly pointed out that the man's physical disabilities are his own stupid fault.
On balance, I accept that you are likely to find prison more difficult than a neurotypical prisoner. I take that into account. Your injuries. After shooting Sergeant Matt Ratner twice, you fired 2 more shots. One hit the wall of the cell, mercifully missing the 2 officers who were bravely restraining you. The 4th hit you in the neck. This resulted in bleeding and a blood clot, which travelled to your brain and has caused some damage. It has also resulted in physical problems. It means you now use a wheelchair, and you have real problems with your communication, often using a whiteboard to help you communicate. It is entirely due to your deliberate and voluntary actions that you have those injuries.
Dezoysa got his whole life order in 2023, and then in 2025 his appeal against his whole life order was dismissed. After viciously knifing a prominent public figure to death, our next antagonist politely asked the police to put his glasses back on for him.
Get it down!
This is the moment in October 2021 when police arrested a young man in a church down in Leigh-on-Sea in Essex, southeast England, for the murder of a prominent local resident.
Allowing you to go in and see the
Mate, we've got to stick our instructions as well at the same time. We've got a taser unit 1 minute away, so we're going to go in and take a taser.
He's not right there. You can't go and stand at the door.
Can you show us, mate? Stay back there. Here on the left.
You can go and stand at the door. Yeah, go on. You can see what's names. You stand at the side. Yeah?
Mate, drop the knife.
Drop the knife now! Mate, drop that knife! Drop that knife! Drop the knife now! Mate, drop the knife! You can drop it! Mate, listen to me. Drop the knife. Mate, no, it's a... Mate, drop the knife! Drop the knife! Mate, you can drop the Listen to me. Look, it's only going to go one way. Just drop that knife. Please drop that knife for me. Just drop the knife.
We'll talk about it.
You don't want to do this. Okay?
Mate, just drop the knife.
You can do this.
Mate, taser.
Get that, mate. Yeah, come on. On the floor now. On the floor. Get it down. Take the taser. We got it.
Right, search him.
Right, mate, at the moment you're under arrest for murder, alright? If you like to say anything, they may harm your defence. If you do not mention when mentioned something which you later on in court, anything you do say may be given as evidence. Do you understand me?
This now has stabbed. What's the man's name?
David Amis.
David Amis.
A-M-E-S-S.
Yep.
Couzens. It's been deceased.
Domestic or hate related in any
Terror.
way? Pardon?
Terror. I'd say hate, yeah.
On what basis? Racial, religious?
Religious.
We have been informed that you made a significant comment following your arrest, where you have made the comment, it was terrorist. Is that correct?
I think I said, what's it called? The nature of the crime, I said is terror. I think that's what I said.
Okay.
In the room where with the lady when I first came in, just speaking to her. Yeah.
So the nature of the crime.
Yeah.
Was terror. Okay. Mr. Ali, is this a terrorist attack?
I mean, I guess yeah. I killed an MP, and I've done it. Yeah.
Okay. Have you planned, or were you planning any other terrorist attacks?
No. Nothing like that, no.
Okay.
Harbi Ali is an Islamic terrorist. In October 2021, he murdered Conservative MP Sir David Amis. He stabbed him more than 20 times while attending a constituency surgery. Ali pleaded not guilty to murder, but then didn't dispute much of the evidence against him in court. He had also plotted to murder other MPs, all in revenge against those, including Amis, who had voted for airstrikes against Syria. He got his whole life order in 2022. Public rampages shock us because they're random, but sometimes the most horrifying murders happen within families, triggered by something as trivial as a video game.
Okay, you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned.
From someone who murdered total strangers to someone who struck a lot closer to home.
46.
Juliana Prosper, 48, Giselle Prosper, 13, and Kyle Prosper, 16, were murdered in their home in Luton, north of London.
Nicholas, we've explained what you've been arrested on suspicion of, okay?
And this is who killed them, 18-year-old Nicholas Prosper, son and brother. Prosper was able to buy the gun that he used on his family by forging a gun licence. He shot his mother dead around 5:30 a.m. on the 13th of September 2024, a Friday the 13th, when, after hearing her eldest child moving around the flat, she got up and challenged him about what he was doing. He had planned to kill her, along with his brother and sister, later on that morning, just before leaving to go to his local primary school to perpetrate the mass shooting that he had planned, to be exact. After murdering his mother, Prosper left on one of her legs a book called How to Kill Your Family. Afterwards, the youth shot his sister in the eye, killing her. Straight after that, he shot his brother in the chest and then stabbed him over 100 times before shooting him in the head, killing him. Sometime after subsequently going out, Prosper himself flagged a passing police car down. What we don't see in the video of his arrest are the moments when, according to police testimony, the killer was behaving with inappropriate cheerfulness with the officers. In his police interview, meanwhile, the perpetrator had no comment and no remorse.
We'd like you to tell us about any involvement that you have had with the deaths of Juliana Falcon, Kyle Prosper and Giselle Prosper. We'd like to tell you about any involvement that you've had with them at all in their murders.
No comments.
Did you kill them?
No comments.
Obviously, it's a fact that, you know, they're dead now. Okay, so that's why we're here talking about it. Are you aware of that?
No comments.
The judge couldn't give Prosper a whole life order, life without parole, because of the perpetrator's guilty pleas and because even though he went out after killing his family with his gun loaded and with a large haul of knives, he didn't harm anyone else but instead surrendered himself to police. If you're wondering about the link between Prosper's actions and video games, he was determined to kill in particular his sister after she apparently made the wrong choices when her brother Prosper got her to play The Walking Dead with him, and the choices, which according to him were incorrect, had a negative impact on his beloved Walking Dead character, Clementine. On the 19th of March 2025 at Luton Crown Court, Prosper got life with a minimum of 49 years. The Prosper case showed how domestic arguments can turn deadly. But in a flat in Shepherd's Bush, West London, a double murder from summer 2024 made national headlines for very different reasons. On the 8th of July 2024, Justin Mosquera, a 35-year-old father of two and adult film actor from Colombia, murdered his sexual partner, 62-year-old Albert Alfonso, who used to pay him for his intimate services, along with that man's former civil partner, 71-year-old Paul Longworth, the murders taking place in the flat in Shepherd's Bush, West London, that the two victims shared. After the murders, Mosquera dismembered the bodies of the two men, stored their heads in a freezer that he got from Facebook Marketplace a day or two later, and then, quite randomly, put the rest of the two men's body parts into suitcases, got a man with a van to take him up to Bristol, and then dumped the cases on Clifton Suspension Bridge. That, thankfully, is as far as the man got before being caught. Mr. Alfonso enjoyed extreme sex, and watching videos of that nature online is how he first came across Mosquera and initiated a sexual friendship with him. And in the course of that friendship, he paid Mosquera to send him videos of himself performing you know what sorts of acts, which over time became more and more extreme. The Colombian met both Mr. Alfonso and Mr. Longworth in person when he travelled to London to visit them in 2023. When Mr. Alfonso invited Mosquera over to London for a second time, which happened in 2024, the two men started having extreme sex together on a regular basis. Mr. Alfonso and Mr. Longworth had since split up, but they remained both close friends and cohabitants of their Shepherd's Bush flat. Mr. Longworth, to clarify, wasn't involved in any sexual interactions with Mosquera. During his stay with Mr. Alfonso, Mosquera was well looked after. He was basically pampered and spoilt and mollycoddled. He got a trip to Brighton, a gym membership, language lessons and trips to bars, all arranged and paid for by Mr. Alfonso. Notwithstanding, on the 8th of July 2024, while Mr. Alfonso was at his job as a lifeguard at a local swimming pool, Mosquera bludgeoned Mr. Longworth to death with a hammer and then hid his body under a bed. Later on, when Mr. Alfonso came home, Mosquera and he started having extreme sex, which Mosquera filmed, and of course at this point Mr. Alfonso had no idea what had happened to his former civil partner, Mr. Longworth. In the middle of the intimate act that Mosquera and Mr. Alfonso shared when Mr. Alfonso came home, Mosquera suddenly picked up a knife and stabbed Mr. Alfonso to death. In court, the jury was shown video footage that showed Mosquera singing and dancing in the shower with glee and satisfaction after murdering his sexual partner and friend. Mosquera was after his two victims' money, having looked up in the days leading up to his acts how to access Alfonso's bank account, while also researching the best ways to murder and to get rid of a body. After killing the two men, the perpetrator was actually able to get thousands out of Mr. Alfonso's bank account. He had also researched the value of the flat, which was owned by Mr. Alfonso, with the view, of course, to cashing it in, but God only knows how he hoped to be able to sell it. Mosquera had planned to dump the bodies into the River Avon, it turns out, but not only did he find that he had vastly underestimated how heavy the cases would be, making him struggle to lug them along as he made his way towards Clifton Suspension Bridge, passers-by were challenging him about the fact that blood was coming out of the case. This, for instance, is the moment when a cyclist asked the man what he was up to when he abandoned the suitcases and started running off.
Mira. Mi jefe es muy malo.
This was the 999 call from a member of the public that led to Mosquera's arrest on the same night.
We're going to need some police up here quite urgently, I think. We had a gentleman up here who was dragging a case behind him. The case is broken and it looks like it's really heavy and there's blood coming out of it. He said it was car parts, oil. It doesn't smell of that at all. We're convinced it's blood.
I've got a hand, mate.
Go.
Yeah.
I can say the words, I need secure.
Go.
Stay down, John, yeah.
Oh my god. What happened? Oh shit.
Secure.
On your side, mate. What happened? Move your legs out to the front. Sit up.
At this time, mate, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You don't have to say anything but may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned, something you later on in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand?
No.
What?
You are currently under arrest for murder, okay?
What's your name, mate?
What?
What's your name? Nombre.
Jot.
Jot?
Yeah.
Jot or Joss?
Jot.
Surname? Jot what?
Jot. Mosquera.
Mosquera?
Yeah.
In court, Mosquera claimed that Mr. Alfonso's killing was manslaughter by reason of loss of control, alleging that Mr. Alfonso himself had killed his former civil partner and close friend, Mr. Longworth. He also said that Mr. Alfonso had raped him every day of his stay with him, and that threats had been made to his family over in Colombia, presumably by Mr. Alfonso. These claims of Mosquera's were very easily disproven by the prosecution. What Mosquera did plead guilty to before his July 2025 trial, however, was possession of indecent images of very, very young people, let's say. On the 24th of October 2025 at Woolwich Crown Court, for his 2 acts of murder, Justin Mosquera got life with a minimum term of 42 years. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.